Brendan Mortensen here. Pleasure to be joined by Orioles broadcaster Ben McDonald, rocking the sweet camo Nikes that we get a full view of.
Kind of like my American Express. I never leave home without my camo.
Exactly. You got to have the camo on.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Getting to know the Orioles broadcasters a little bit better, Ben. Just kind of open-ended questions here. Get to know you a little bit better.
All right.
I want to start with just kind of growing up. What did your relationship with baseball look like? Obviously, I'm sure you started playing it at a very young age and got into it from there.
Yeah, look, I was just one of the kids that loved sports. And whatever season was, I was playing that sport. So I grew up playing from the time, really, I was 6 years old. I played football, basketball, and baseball every year from the time I was 6 years old. And whatever season it was, that was my favorite sport at the time, you know. Yeah. And so I did that and even went to high school and played football, basketball, and baseball in high school. And then that carried over to LSU, where I signed. And not many people know this, but I was more heavily recruited out of high school to play basketball than baseball. So I signed a basketball scholarship at LSU with the intent of playing baseball too. And the idea was we're going to rock along and do it and see which one, eventually wins out. And it was baseball that eventually won out, and that was the path I chose. But baseball wasn't necessarily my favorite sport growing up. I really enjoyed the game of basketball better just because I was probably one of those ADD kids before there was such a diagnosis. So I like to rip and run and get up and down the court. I couldn't sit still. And baseball is a sport where if you're not pitching, then you're pretty much sitting still a lot,
sure.
you know. And so I love the game of basketball, just running and getting up and down the court, the challenge. Baseball came a little easier to me than what basketball did. So I enjoyed basketball.
So what was the point in college for you where, obviously you said basketball was your favorite sport. You had baseball too. What was the point in college where you played baseball and you went, oh, that might be the route. That might be the better sport for me?
I think it was after my freshman year at LSU, I get shipped off to the Alaskan Summer League to go play summer baseball because we were fortunate enough my freshman year in basketball at LSU. We go all the way to the Elite Eight. So I got to experience March Madness, and we're just Indiana. You're too young, remember, but it was a game we played Indiana. Bobby Knight slammed and the phone went up during the game there at the score table, and we had the last second shot, and we shot a 15-foot jumper that went in and came out. Indiana beat us by one point, and they went on to win the national championship that year. But so I didn't get out to baseball until after SEC play had already began in baseball because we went so far in the basketball season. So I never really got ramped up during that college season. I was mostly a reliever with a few starts. And so coach was like, hey, you got to go off summer ball. I got to see what you can do because I want you to put you in a rotation next year. So you got to go play summer ball because I only threw like 30 innings. Yeah. So I go off, I go play summer ball, and all of a sudden I start starting. And by the end of the summer, my fastball started ticking up 96, 97. And that was a time where the average fastball was 88, and all of a sudden I'm exceeding it by 8 miles an hour, and I thought to myself, whoa, man, if I'm throwing 96 or 97 as a freshman, this very well might be my ticket if I'm going to play pro ball, And then I wanted to put the full year in the next year because I wanted to make the Olympic team after my sophomore year, and I knew that if I went and played basketball again, we may get March Madness. I never reached my full potential in baseball. I don't make that Olympic team. So that's when I told Coach Brown, the basketball coach, hey, Coach, I hate this, but listen, I got to bow out of basketball, and I want to focus on baseball. And he was upset about it. The funny story is about August, or it might have been September, they were just cranking up basketball practice. The whole basketball team came down with mono. And he calls me up, Dale Brown calls up the basketball. He goes, Ben, I need you to come back out because I don't even have enough players to even practice, much less play a ball game. I said, Coach, I'll tell you what, you kept me on, and he kept me on scholarship, and I wasn't even playing my sophomore year. I said, I'm going to come back out, and I will play with you until January 1. And when January 1 rolls around, I got to roll, And so I went back out, played my sophomore year, the first couple months of the basketball season, and then when January 1 got there, it was all baseball after that.
Yeah, so obviously that decision to switch over to baseball ended up working out pretty well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Now, if you talk to Dale Brown, he would tell you, and he begged me, he said, Ben, you're good enough to play in the NBA. And he thought I was making a mistake when I walked away from the game of basketball. But in my heart of hearts, I really felt like baseball was going to be my ticket. And so it was a tough decision. It really was because I loved the game. But I knew if I had a chance, in my opinion, of playing, not that I couldn't have played the NBA, but I thought I had a better chance of playing in the MLB than I did the NBA. And so, yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, seems like it worked out.
Yeah, it worked
well.
out fine, yeah.
#1 overall pick in '89. What were your initial impressions of being drafted by Baltimore? You're a Louisiana kid. You go to LSU.
Absolutely. I didn't know anybody on the team. I knew 2 people on the whole team. I knew Cal Ripken Jr. because everybody knew Cal Ripken Jr. And I knew Greg Olson because Greg, me and him played against. He went to the University of Auburn.
Yeah.
And so we played 2 years against each other in SEC play. But other than that, man, I didn't know anybody on the Orioles because we didn't get cable vision at my house.
So just to be clear, you're not talking like I only knew 2 guys personally. You're talking I didn't know more than 2 guys.
If they told me to name 2 people on the Baltimore Orioles in 1989, I would have given them Cal Ripken and Greg Olson. That's the only 2 I knew. That's it. And the reason is we had the old Bunny Ears TV growing up where you got 3 local channels, and all I watched was Monday Night Baseball as a kid growing up. So occasionally you get an American League team, but then we got Cablevision about my junior year in high school, and the only 2 channels on Cablevision was WGN and WTBS.
Yeah.
I grew up watching National League, dude. Like, I could name everybody on the Chicago Cubs. I could name everybody. I love Dale Murphy. He was my favorite. You know, I could name everybody on the Braves. But I had no squat about the American League because it was never on TV at home, other than when the World Series came on and you got to watch the World Series. And so, yeah, like I was freaked out because I didn't know the history of the Baltimore Orioles. I didn't know the players. I didn't know anything about it. So I kind of had to have a crash course on where I was going and the organization I was with and how successful they had been and obviously the players. So I kind of had a crash course of learning, all right, this is where we are now, you know?
So outside of the team, when you first get here, or what are some of the first things that you learn about the community, about the organization, you know, the level of culture shock probably going from LSU to Baltimore?
The funniest thing I remember is the folks around here consider themselves Southern people. And that freaked me out because I'm like, y'all don't know what Southern is because I'm like from way down there. I'm down there on the bayou, you know. And so, but these folks around here, but what I tell you what I really enjoyed, these folks are a lot like the people at home. They're blue-collar people. They get up, they put their shoes on every day, they get dressed, they go to work. That's what they do, just like the folks at home do. And it's a lot of blue-collar people. The seafood around here, I'm obviously being from Louisiana, it's about crawfish, crabs, shrimp, oysters. That's what I grew up eating. That's my favorite. And I got up here, I couldn't believe the shrimp, the crabs. I was like, man, it's like I never left home. Now, they cook it differently. We boil our seafood at home. We season the water. We boil it. The seasoning sinks into the meat, and that's how we eat our seafood at home. But up here, obviously, most everything is steamed with the Old Bay sprinkled on top of it. Loved it, though. I fell in love with it right away, you know, and it's like when I discovered – when I was old enough at 21, when I signed here to drink a beer and eat a crab cake, that automatically became my favorite meal was a cold beer and a good old crab cake.
There you go.
So I fit right in. I loved it, you know, and the people were great to me here. And for whatever reason, they took me in. And look, I was a kid when I got here. I was 21 years old, man. I was right out of college when I got here. And so I was scared to death being in a man's world for the first time and competing at the big league level was difficult. It was challenging, and being away from home really for the first time because I went to LSU. That's 20 minutes from my house where I grew up. So this is really the first time I was truly away from home. So but it was cool. The people were great. They still are, and I've got some great relationships with some folks around here over the years.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an underrated aspect of getting drafted to a new place, right?
Yes.
Especially out of college, in your scenario where college is right close to home. Not only are you embarking on this new career path, but it's a new place to live. This is a whole new thing for you here.
100%. And it was an adjustment, you know, living by yourself, being away from home for the first time, really. Now, I went off and played summer ball, and I went to the Olympics, and we were gone a lot. But you're always with your buddies and your teammates and those kind of things. But this is the first time where I go home to an empty apartment or whatever, you know. And so, yeah, it was challenging. And when you're away from home, and because, you know, my strength was my family and my mom and my dad who were at every ball game when I was growing up, and I could sit there and talk to them about stuff after the game. All of a sudden now, I got to pick up the phone and talk to them. They're not here anymore, you know. And so, yeah. So it's growing pains in some ways. I wouldn't want to do it any differently, to be honest with you. I didn't want to be in the minor leagues learning how to pitch and doing it. It was difficult, but I'd rather be in the big leagues learning and doing what I did.
Do you remember your first big league game that your family came to?
They were there. When I got called up the first time, Mom and Dad you know, a lot like Jackson Holiday's, whose parents just made it here. You know, you find out 24 hours before roughly, and so everybody scrambles to get on the airplane and get here. You know, so they found out about it and were able to get here in time, which was really cool.
So after your playing career, now you're here broadcasting. Why was broadcasting the route? Why wasn't it, you know, is there an alternate universe where you're doing your best Ed Orgeron impression down at LSU? Why was it broadcasting for
Go
you?
Tigers.
There you go.
You know, it happened by accident, to be honest. I never graduated from college. I'm probably the only person in this warehouse that doesn't have a college degree. And probably one of the only broadcasters that doesn't have one either.
I think you're the only #1 overall pick, to be fair, too. So.
Could be. You know, so I don't have a college degree. I thought about going back, and I just never went back. And it was honestly my college coach, legendary coach Skip Bertman. You know, I was sitting around him one day watching an LSU game, you know, and we were sitting in the stands just shooting the bull like we always do. And he's like, you know what you'd be good at? And I was like, what's that, Coach? Man, he said, you'd be a good broadcaster. I was like, Coach, I've never broadcasted anything in my life. Now, my major was broadcasting journalism, but I was just getting into it whenever I left. And I said, Coach, I don't know about that. He said, I tell you what I'm going to do. LSU baseball 20-something years ago used to be on CST, Cox Sports Television. It was about 8 or 10 games a year. Is all that. This is way before the SEC network, way before all that stuff that we have now. He said, I'm going to make a phone call for you. I was like, Coach, I don't know about this. I don't know. He's like, you'll be great. You'll be great. So all of a sudden, about 3 days later, the producer for CST calls me up and he says, hey, Skip says you're interested. And I was like, kinda. And
I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. And so I started doing some games on CST, not having a clue of what I was doing. Didn't even have a scorebook, didn't keep score, just showed my rear end up and started talking. I liked it. It was challenging. It was different. The game's different from up top than it is down there from what I see. And that's how it all began. And I started saying, okay, all right, this is all right. And they weren't paying hardly any money at all. It wasn't for the money. It was just the experience and my way of staying involved in the game of baseball, staying involved with LSU baseball. And so one thing led to another, and I rocked along doing that for about 5 years, started keeping score, started figuring some stuff out, and all of a sudden ESPN called, and they go, hey, we want you to do a super regional. I went, oh, my gosh. And super regional was big, you know. And I mean, I go from a guy, and that's in my second year, I want you to do a super regional. So I did the super regional and realized real quickly that if I was going to do this, I needed to get better. I needed to be more prepared. Again, I didn't go to school really to do this. Nobody really told me anything about broadcasting. Never really hung around a broadcasting booth in my life. So I was kind of dumb to a lot of the things that I needed to do. And so I said, okay, I got to be a little bit more prepared. And so I started preparing better, started asking questions and keeping score and all those different things. And all of a sudden, a few more years go by and the SEC network got started. So they called, and that's when I really dove in quickly to a lot of studio stuff and doing ball games, you know, and one thing kind of led to another, and I was doing that and started doing like 65 SEC games a year and got on doing regionals, super regionals, and I'll do the College World Series for I think the 8th straight year coming up this year. And, you know, and that's when the Orioles started calling. I guess they saw what I was doing at ESPN, want to know if I was interested in hopping on and doing some stuff here. And, of course, I began on radio here many years ago with Joe Angel and spent a lot of time with Joe Angel, got to work with Gary Thorne in the TV booth for a while. And so, you know, the last 5 or 6, it's been more, you know, it started off for 20 or 30 events a year. Then it just kind of creeped up. And, you know, I did 90 last year, you know. So it's work. I tell people all the time, they're like, it's got to be so easy doing what you're doing. I go, yes and no. I mean, talking about the game is easy, but the prep we do, I think, you know, but I mean, a lot of people don't realize. And honestly, so much information. I don't use most of it, but it's kind of like if we get into one of those 10-1 ball games, I need a little extra info.
Yeah.
I got it written down. So
better to have it.
Yeah, better to have it than not to have it. Better to be prepared. And that's kind of how I've always been. And my mom and dad taught me something many years ago. They always said, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I was always prepared as a baseball player. I always felt like I outworked everybody. I wanted to be the best on the field. And now I'm to the point where if I'm going to spend my time doing it, I want to be the best broadcaster. That's my goal. I want to be the best color guy in all of Major League Baseball. Like, that's my goal.
Yeah. And so you got those reps with ESPN, with SEC Network. I'm sure if you're doing an SEC Network game and you're watching LSU baseball, it feels like home a little bit. But to do color for the Orioles, for the team that drafted you #1 overall, that you spent a lot of years of your career with, what does it mean to you to be able to call games here, not just call games in general?
Yeah, I mean, it means more. I mean, this is the team that gave me an opportunity many years ago. This is the organization that did that. And while there's a lot of different faces now, then it's still the Baltimore Orioles at the end of the day. And it's an honor for me. I felt like I had a great relationship with the fan base here. For whatever reason, as a youngster, they took me in. And there were some difficult times, obviously. There was some boos that went along, and I deserved to get booed at times, you know. And there was a lot of expectations, too, that was very difficult to live up to. But as a whole, this fan base took me in and realized who I was, and I was just another guy that wanted to do my best to help the Orioles win and all those kind of stuff. So it means a lot more to me to be here. You know, I enjoy doing LSU because I grew up, 20 minutes from university. I grew up going to football, basketball, baseball games, got to play basketball and baseball there. So LSU always has a piece of me. I bleed purple and gold, obviously, because I'm from down there, and that's who we are down there. But the Baltimore Orioles have always been my second home. This is my second home. This is where I'm most comfortable, and I'm so thankful for A, getting to be a player, and B, now getting to be a broadcaster, because it's rare that you have two different careers. And that's I know it's kind of the same thing. It's baseball, but I'm very fortunate to have had two different careers, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and we always see you, around the field during batting practice, and we saw you down in Sarasota at spring training. As a former player, and not just, obviously as a color guy, you got to know the game. You've got to be able to break it down to fans, but you're also, a former player with a great career, and you're able to bring what you have learned to the players in a unique way that not a lot of broadcasters can. How do you find that balance? And what do you think that balance is like for you of, okay, I'm doing the broadcasting here, but I'm also a part of this team in some way, and I want to talk to the guys and impart whatever I can?
Well, I tell the guys all the time, cause, so every now and then they'll give me a hard time and go, man, you were hard on me. But I say, listen, I said, I got to be honest about what I'm seeing out there. I'm never going to demean a player. I never do that. But if Ryan Mountcastle should have made a play, and he knows he should have made it, I'm going to say Ryan Mountcastle should have made that play. And it's just an honest statement, because I get my credibility, although I'm all Orioles, there's no doubt about that. But I got to be honest about what I'm seeing, because the fans that are watching the game, they know the game of baseball here in Baltimore. This fan base knows baseball. And so I can't make it seem all rosy when it's not rosy. You know what I'm saying? And so I make sure that I say it in a way. I never try to demean a player, because I always tell people always say, "What's your biggest challenge?" And I say, my biggest challenge in doing this from where I sit now is remembering how difficult the game is. Because where I'm sitting right now, the game looks easy.
Yeah.
But if I go back to my time, I remember the game. This is one of the most difficult games there is to play right here. So I always keep that in the back of my head when I'm doing ball games. Remember, I always tell myself, Ben, remember how difficult this game is. And the second thing that I got a long time ago, and I've always tried to remember this too, and that's the two things in my broadcasting world that I've never forgotten. The other one is this: about my third year of broadcasting, I ran into an old lady in Denham Springs, Louisiana, where I live, and I'm walking through with my buggy, shopping or whatever, and she stops and she looks at me. She goes, "You're so-and-so." I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." She's like, "You do the LSU games, don't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." She said, "I like the way you broadcast." And I went, whoa. It's like the third year doing it. I'm trying to figure some stuff out. I said, "Tell me what you like about what I do." She said, "I don't know anything about baseball. I don't watch that much baseball, but when you're doing baseball, I understand what you're saying." And I went, bing, 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 bing.
There it is, yeah.
There it is. And I've always tried to go out of my way to not complicate the game of baseball. Baseball is a simple game, and I try to make the game simple. Now, every now and then, especially with Kevin Brown, we're going to dive into the analytical world. We're going to talk about expected this and FIP and all these crazy things. But for the most part, I've always tried to remember it's a simple game. I may bore the person that watches it all the time that knows, but also I'm going for the person just sitting down for the first time, that's watching the game of baseball, that's really trying to learn it. That's the person I'm going for, because I want to draw that person into the wonderful game of baseball. And so I've always tried to make it simple. I've always tried to keep it simple. And that lady many years ago, it's been over 20 years now, for me, she gave me the most important advice for me to be successful about what I'm doing. And I've always tried to remember that.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice to carry with you, and I know the fans always appreciate your insight and knowledge of the game, and I appreciate your time here, Ben. Thank you.
Anytime. I enjoyed it.